Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree. I am here today to talk about kombucha and live fermented beverages. So most of you are probably somewhat familiar with kombucha, but I'm going to go over the basics just in case. Most of the time when you get kombucha in the store, you're going to find something like the classic GT Synergy, where it has some kind of fruit or herbal flavor added to it. But essentially they're all coming from the same base. So when you look at kombucha, you see this kind of cloudy goodness down here in the bottom. And that is actually something that's where the fermentation comes from. This is sort of the debris of the SCOBY. So the SCOBY it stands for symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And it kind of looks like a hockey puck made out of chicken when they grow in a vat and they float to the top. But these are kind of little babies, and you could actually grow a SCOBY from this because this beverage is alive. So kind of the minimum that you need to make kombucha is that SCOBY colony, which you would then take and put in a mixture of typically black tea and sugar. So what happens is the yeast breaks down the sugar into alcohols, and then the bacteria breaks down the alcohols, and you have this lovely, tangy kind of vinegary, but in a good way, fizzy beverage. And so you will see it is fizzy. So if I can get that to focus for you. So it does have these little natural bubbles on the top. It's not carbonated post-brewing. Because it's alive, because it's fermented, it gets a natural carbonation, which is why you should not shake it to mix in those little bits at the bottom. You want to do a gentle tip. So if you shake it too hard, it's going to end up exploding just like a 2-liter. But you can kind of see in here, if I can get it to focus. Well, so that's mixed in now. You don't see it sitting on the bottom so much anymore. And that's just a gentle tip will do that. You don't want to shake it up and have yourself an exploding kombucha. So that's your basic kombucha. This one happens to have strawberry flavor in it, but otherwise it's essentially fermented sugar and tea. So you end up with a relatively low sugar in the finished product unless you add the fruit back in. Now, you can also get kombuchas that are kind of more herbal in flavor. So this one is Lavender Melon. This is from a company called Kefir, and they also make something called water kefir, which I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. But this kombucha is going to be a lot less sweet because it doesn't have that fruit component. The melon's there, but it's not as strong. So you can also see like it's a little bit lower calorie because there's not as much sugar added back into the beverage. But it's still alive, it's still kicking, and it's got all those good probiotics in it that will help feed your gut bacteria. And you can kind of think of that as the garden of your body. That's where everything good grows from. Your gut has a big effect on your immune system. It has a big effect on your digestion. And it just sort of generally filters everything that you put into your system. So when you get something like this that has lavender in it, you're also getting the bonuses of the functions of lavender. So if you've never tried one of these more herbal kind of kombuchas before, that might be a consideration. They have an extra function to them because of that component. Now, if you want to go even further in making your kombucha functional, we can go back to GTs, and you can get something like this that has chia seeds in it. So chia seeds are this really cool little seed that has, the best way I can describe it is a coating that naturally grows on it that absorbs a huge amount of liquid and creates this kind of jelly. So I don't know how well you can see here, but when I turn this, they don't sink to the bottom because the little chia seeds absorb the water and are sort of evenly suspended in the kombucha. So they'll continue to float throughout this, and it's almost like bubble tea on steroids because the whole thing has that gel texture. And so the chia seeds are something that you might want to add to your diet for extra fiber, for protein, for omega-3s, and also it helps keep you full longer because of this like hydrating property that it has where it sucks up all the liquid. So if you want a kombucha that also feels almost like a meal, try one of these guys. Now the other thing that you can get, and they're often going to be made by some of the same companies, is water kefir. So you can see with water kefir, you still get that little bit of haze on the bottom if it's a natural one, but it doesn't tend to be as intense because kefir grains are they're like a SCOBY. They're the same type of thing. It's a colony of bacteria and yeast, but they form these little tiny grains. They look almost like overhydrated rice. And even though they have kefir in the name, there's no dairy involved in water kefir. It's not the same as the yogurt type. You're still getting a bunch of strains of good bacteria that are going to be good for your gut, but you're not getting any dairy. And you get less chunkiness because those little water kefir grains are much smaller and less prone to shedding, is the best way I can put it, than the SCOBY that makes the kombucha. The other difference with water kefir is that it typically does not contain tea. So there's no tea involved in the fermentation. If you're particularly sensitive to caffeine, that might be a concern for you. So it's an interesting thing, changes the flavor a little. They still have that vinegar hit, but it's not as intense as a kombucha. The other cool thing about this particular one, and the reason I like it a lot, is there's basically no sugar in this kind. Some of the Kevitas do have sugar, but the lemon cayenne, which is not particularly spicy, you don't have to worry about like a big hot saucy kick when you drink it. But the lemon cayenne has very, very little sugar added back into it after that fermentation process. So it's a really good one if you're not feeling well, so you don't want to eat too much sugar, or if you're on a diet where too much sugar is going to affect your blood sugar in a bad way. So that's a water kefir. And then Kevita also makes this interesting tweak that I haven't seen from other companies, but I really like. This is probably my favorite one, is they make water kefir with apple cider vinegar added into it. So this is a same type of base as the water kefir that I showed you here. It doesn't have the tea like you get in standard kombucha. This one happens to be elderberry, which apparently Michigan is one of the sickest states in the country right now. In other words, everybody and their neighbor has some kind of cold here. And I really like the boost of the elderberry with the apple cider vinegar for kind of kicking things out of your system when you're not feeling great. This is one that can kind of help, for my experience anyway, get you back on track. I find it's really, especially when I'm not feeling well, this one's good. But that apple cider vinegar with the berry gives you a tangy, fruity flavor that isn't, despite the fact that it has vinegar in it, as vinegary as classic kombucha. So if you're looking for kind of a different flavor and some function besides just the probiotic to your beverage, you might want to check out their apple cider vinegar tonics. They make a few other flavors too. The other one we have is mandarin ginseng, and that's more for energy, whereas this one's kind of for immune system. Now, like I said, all of these are going to have bubbles. I don't want to shake it to show you, but all of these are going to be naturally carbonated because they're fermented. So the important thing with kombucha, if you're going to buy it, is don't shake it unless you want it to explode. If you want to make your own kombucha and you don't have a SCOBY, we do have in the back, and I don't have an example up here, but what we call the black cap GT kombuchas that are their original stronger formula. You have to be 21 to purchase them, but they tend to have a higher percentage of this live culture down here in the bottom. So it's not as much work to feed it and grow a SCOBY of your own. So if you don't know anybody who has a SCOBY, but you want one, you can try out those 21 plus GT's kombuchas and feed that until you can grow a nice sized SCOBY in order to make your own. Oh, and one other quick fact, it actually takes typically something like 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks to make a batch of kombucha, but it only takes 2 to 3 days to make a batch of water kefir. So if you want to try fermenting your own beverages, but you don't necessarily want the long wait time of kombucha, it might be worth investigating water kefir because that is a much quicker option if you're making it your own at home. So I'm going to sample out the flavors that I just showed you. I've got 5 different kinds here, probably until 5:30, 6 o'clock if you want to come down and check them out. If you have a SCOBY that you don't need, feel free to post it in the comments. Somebody might be interested in that. Or if you're looking for one and you don't have it, post that in the comments too, and we'll see if we can match up some SCOBYs to new homes today. So if you want to try some kombuchas and some Kevitas, come on down. I'll be sampling for the next hour and a half or so. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a happy Tuesday and that you aren't too sick. Bye, everybody.